Welcome to Unspoken Conversations. Your words have power. Together, we will have a multi-generational conversation on topics that are considered taboo, risky, controversial, but most of all, thought-provoking. Our goal is to educate and inspire positive action that will motivate change and understanding. This can only happen when we are willing to have an unspoken conversation. Thank you for joining us. All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining. This is episode 16. Yay, I'm moving right along. I'm telling you, I got some momentum behind me now. But I think for August, I think I'm gonna take a break because I got a busy August of traveling. So thank you again. So tonight we are going to discuss affirmative action as if there hasn't been enough conversation. Um, I don't think you could ever have enough conversation about this particular topic, but ultimately, my goal this evening is to educate myself as well as my audience, be able to explore some questions, notions, ideas about what our understanding of affirmative action is, how it relates to, let's say, the Constitution, how it relates to civil rights and what have you, because these are all questions that I myself have, because I will be honest and say I had a particular understanding of our Constitution and our Bill of Rights and what have you. And I'm not ashamed to say it that when the Supreme Court ruling came down a couple of weeks ago for affirmative action, I I was a little confused. I did not want to I did not want to jump on a bandwagon with everybody else. Like all people. Well, I won't say all, but black people were upset. We were up in arms. We felt like we were, but we were thrust backwards and so on and so forth. And I didn't necessarily feel that was true. Uh, and it, like I said, it is. It's not because I think the Supreme Court is right or wrong. It's just that I have a certain understanding about the laws that we have in place, and so this panel that I have with us today, I myself, even though they don't want to accept the title, I consider them to be scholars. Um, so they wasn't happy with that title. So we I think we settled on well-read individuals, meaning that these are people who are like myself. They're gonna do some investigating, some digging, they're gonna try to make some sense out of stuff. They are not they don't necessarily subscribe to the status quo. It has to make sense. And so they all agreed to join me in this conversation, and I'm just super excited and appreciative of them all. First, we have my brother Rob Kenner. I love talking to Rob because I consider him a scholar slash historian. And I enjoy listening to him. I enjoy talking to anybody who will give me pause and make me want to think and go investigate some stuff and look it up. So that's exciting for me, and especially to see to listen to a black man who is dropping some knowledge. So yeah, I'm super excited and grateful to have Rob with us. Then we have my sister Rosaline, who I also I still consider her a scholar, but Rosaline is also a individual who I enjoy talking to. She educates me, gives me things to think about and go and research. And I know that she has done her own share of researching various things as it relates to people of color. And likewise, the same with Vanessa. So, Rose, thank you so much for joining us. And Vanessa is my educator, and I love her because I can get on the phone. Look, anything politically controversial, I'll be like, Vanessa, okay, so what just happened with this? And so I love talking to her when it comes down to politics, because I'll be the first to say up until maybe 5 years ago, I could have cared less about politics. I ain't gonna lie. But it's funny as as I get older and I I guess I could say I got on it. I have a different set of lenses on now. Things look real different to me now than they did 10 years ago. And so I feel like right now I owe it to myself to educate myself, to ask questions, to have conversations. And so that's what we are doing today. So I want to thank our guests that are on right now. We have Dantia and Amy and Lena and Tyler. Thank you so much. For those who are watching via YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe. I like saying that. Like, share, and subscribe. Um, and you are welcome to engage us in conversation. The reason why we are live is because I want audience participation. So please, if you feel like you have something that can lend to this conversation, by all means, please share. If you have a question, you feel like you need some clarity on something that is said, please do not hesitate to ask, and we will make every attempt to answer. So I'm doing my homework, y'all, and I created a PowerPoint. Tell you, look, each episode I get better and better. um, But yeah, I created a PowerPoint because I realized that the little boxes that they gave me that I could put information in, it wasn't enough space. So I was like, I need slides. So hopefully, everyone can see the PowerPoint. If you can't, I can't really see thumbs up from my audience. But if you can just all say yes, or maybe you can give me a thumbs up and I'll see it, because I see a heart from Tyler. So maybe so yeah, if you just give me a thumbs up and let me know that you can see my PowerPoint, that would be awesome. Hey Felicia, hello, Mima. Thank you, Amy. I appreciate you so much. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and jump in to this discussion. And so the very first thing that I thought it's really important to address is the 14th Amendment. The reason being is that uh, I have my undergrad in legal studies, and I remember as much as I didn't like political science, I did pay a little bit of attention, and I remember having to go through the Constitution, and then I had other classes. I actually had a constitutional law class that I loved, and so I remember the 14th Amendment, and I don't want to go through reading it. Well, it's not the entire amendment, so the very first section is really the most important section, I think, to that amendment. So it says all persons born or naturalized in the United States. So you see, I highlighted that. I made it yellow because in my mind, when you say all persons born or naturalized in the United States, that's everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't. It's not. I think that's kind of clear, despite the fact of when the Constitution was written. I'm the person. It makes me think back to what my pastor said today. Words matter.
Mm-hmm.
Words absolutely matter. And so, with that being said, it says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So, correct me if I'm wrong, is not the United States Constitution the law of the land, the so called law of the land? Yes, Rose.
Well, first of all, you have to remember that that amendment did not apply to women. It only applied to males. So we were
Well,
already facing.
White
okay, but
male.
wait. Okay, but yeah, so
No. It included black
Oh,
men.
oh yeah, the
understand.
14th Amendment. Yeah.
Yes.
14th.
But
Yeah, yeah.
let's start with just with notwithstanding all the all the underlying stuff.
Mhm.
The U.S. Constitution technically is supposed to be the law of the land, correct? Of the United States.
Right.
Like there's nothing above. There's no law outside of God's law. There's no law above um the U.S. Constitution.
Mhm. Right.
Technically, like the buck was supposed to stop with the U.S. Constitution, correct? I mean, is that a fair assessment? As
Well,
we know it's up, we know other stuff, but for all intents and purposes.
so as I mentioned that only because literally it says in that statute when you continue to read through that entire law, because we're just highlighting obviously the key point of that amendment, but it was directly addressing males. So the assumption was even when it was written that women and or any other group when the Constitution was written was all written for white males. Bottom line, period. So the assumption was you have to remember they assumed that everybody knew, and everybody did in some way, shape, form, or fashion, that any law that was written in the Constitution was specifically for white men. So even in the 14th Amendment, now it's not talking about white men, but it is talking about men only. It was not addressing women. It was not addressing people of color per se, but it's addressing men. So even though black men in writing appeared to have rights to vote or to act or to do whatever the 14th Amendment was addressing, they still did not include everybody. So even though all persons meant all white people or all males. So it was never about including everybody in the first place, which is how it was used eventually to form other, to enact other laws, as you mentioned here, when people were fighting in the courts. This is what they're using that one sentence there: all persons, not all men, not all white, not whatever. That's what they use to form most of these, to get most of these laws passed. Get some
Well,
passed.
with some of the clauses, like
Right.
the equal protection clause,
Yeah.
where it says nor deny any
Mhm.
person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws,
Right.
it was intended to stop state governments from discriminating against Black Americans. And that's the kind of stuff that led to the landmark civil rights
Right.
cases.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Using that highlighted sentence really was the catalyst for many of the laws and many of the acts and much of the legislation that we see today. That one clause, because People went back and said, as it was spoken earlier, speak the word back to them.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Speak the
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
word back to
Yeah.
them.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Yes, Rob.
So we have to remember at the time that this was written. So
Right.
this was
Mhm.
after the Civil War. This is
Mhm.
around
Mhm.
this is around Reconstruction.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So they had to put, which I would say would be the first pass in trying to get, and I'm putting quotes, affirmative action in
Mhm.
place.
Mhm. Mhm.
This is around the time when Black people, and I'm only saying Black people and because this is who were the target audience at
Mhm.
that time,
Mhm.
were able to get positions in government, positions in jobs that were originally denied to them. So now that they're U.S. citizens and recognized as U.S. citizens, now they have the ability to hold office or
Right.
be in positions of authority.
Right.
And
Mhm.
we got to remember, in the reconstituted South, you had a lot of people of the former Confederacy who were still holding a grudge. But
Mm-hmm.
at
Mhm.
that time,
Codes.
they allowed to get themselves reindoctrinated and be reassumed into the Union and be accepted into the Union. They ratified these amendments
Mhm.
with the stark reason of saying we'll figure out another way around these,
Mhm.
which is
Mm-hmm.
what eventually happened. You had the Jim Crow, you
Jim
had the
Crow.
race codes, you
Yep.
had all these other things that were happening in the South. And I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't say just the South, but all over
Right.
the US at that
Exactly.
time to figure out a way to circumvent
Right.
these
Mm-hmm.
amendments,
Right.
which
Mhm.
is what happened.
Mhm.
But at that time, that's what they wanted to do because the unfortunately, not just hate, but ignorance runs deep. And without recognizing and saying that, perhaps, well, you have some people that said, Black people are just as intelligent and just as able-bodied and able-minded to do the job as anybody else.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, when you have been indoctrinated and say that, oh, they're subservient, they really don't understand what's going on. There's been tests and scientists that came along with phlebotomy and eugenics and saying that we were not able to do the jobs that were put, and this continued on for decades, well
Mhm.
into the 20th century and well into the 21st century. We're only good for labor or
Mhm.
certain specific
Mhm.
tasks that we're taught, but to have the mindset to achieve and work in an academic capacity of authority, that's just something they just could not comprehend or did not want to comprehend.
Mhm.
So that's what the context of this is. This is why they had to make some adjustments later on down the line to include women, to include and other people of color per se. But this is what the contents of this amendment was, along with the 13th and the
Mhm.
15th amendments. It was
Mhm.
just because of Reconstruction.
Mhm.
Um, but we got to remember that after the 1875 compromise, when the Republicans were trying to get their president in office, they took the Freedmen's Bureau and
Mhm.
Reconstruction ended.
Mhm.
So now the South was trying to reclaim their sovereignty
Mhm.
Black Americans of that time. So
So
it continued on through that time. So
okay, so let me ask you this question. So right now we still have three branches of government, and we know that the purpose, well, the original purpose of SCOTUS was to answer constitutional questions. Um, since I guess since the formation of the Supreme Court, it seems to me they're getting further away from actually just focusing on the constitutional question. But now that based on our discussion and based on everything that you all have elaborated on, and with regards to the Constitution, why, with all of these executive orders, acts, various legislation laws, cases being overturned, and so on and so forth, how is it that the Constitution even can still stand?
Well, it's funny you say that. It's almost like people can take the Bible and interpret it to their needs, the way they want to interpret it. They're going to twist it. They're going to find a way. They try to find a gray area, and they'll interpret it the way they want to, which would not be the true word of God. Then you also have, and you got to look at it. It says you have the gospel according to Matthew, according to Luke, John. You know what I'm saying? They all saw what they saw.
Yeah.
But when they tell the story, it's going to come out the way they saw it. Now, mostly it gels. But when we go to the Constitution, it seems like the more we progress, the more they want to hold us back. And they dig in and they try to find those areas that will make us fall back instead of progressing further. So it's all in, their job, the SCOTUS's job is to define the law.
Right.
And so they'll say something, and then you'll have someone that'll write a dissension. They're reading the same laws, but you'll have, say, Clarence Thomas says one thing, and Ketanji Brown she's going to dissent and say, no, that's not what it says. That's not how it was meant. So we're pretty much
so then the Constitution is even in its current format is all left up to interpretation.
Exactly. And the interpretation of the people in power.
Right.
That's the part. The people in power. And so when you figure like affirmative action, when it was started, like I think JFK was the one who first coined the phrase. Yeah. And he meant for it to be like, for anybody who's been displaced, this, whatever, we need to make a level playing field. Okay. And anybody who's been subject to discrimination needs to come into the fold. We're not going to get rid of this problem until the Supreme Court, Congress, the Senate, all of them looks like America. Right now, the Senate does not look like America.
Right.
The Supreme Court does not look like America. And until we do, we need affirmative action. I mean, that's my stance on it. But that's my interpretation. Until you have something that represents what America looks like, it's not going to be equal.
But and I appreciate what you're saying, that the reason why we need affirmative action, so let me say, I'm not saying that we don't need, I'm not saying that we don't need it, or bottom line, what it is that we need, right, is we need equity across the board. I don't even know so much of that is inclusion as much as it is absolute equity. But I'm sorry, Rob, you was gonna say something?
Yeah. Before? So I was reading something today, and the Supreme Court actually is pretty diverse. Well, not as diverse as it could be, but the simple fact that you have two Black justices, two African American justices, you have a an Asian, is 3 women on there. So there is a level of diversity on that
Mhm.
court. The unfortunate
On its
thing we
face.
on it,
Clarence Thomas is not
okay.
black.
I was getting to that. I was
Vanessa,
getting to that point.
Vanessa, we're not going to go there, okay?
But,
All right, we're not going
but
there. Okay,
it's a level of
leave Clarence
irony.
alone.
It's a level of irony
Okay.
that this is what the Supreme Court looks like on its face,
Hmm.
but
On his face.
unfortunately, this is such a polarizing. Our nation has become so polarized. Um, you can agree to disagree without it's hard to disagree without being violently disagreeable.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Um, and the problem here is that it's a tribal thing now with conservative arm against what's called the progressive or liberal arm, and then you still have another one called the establishment. So you have a quagmire of different outlooks on life, on different outlooks on the law itself.
Rob,
And not taking. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, who, for clarity purposes, who would be considered the establishment?
From the Supreme Court's perspective, if you've been in position for a level of time and you just are disconnected and you're in it for your own self-interest, that's establishment.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay.
Nothing's changed.
Mm-hmm.
If nothing's changed, um, conservatives, they well, I don't want to say conservatives because that's actually not a bad word, as everybody has a level of conservatism on
Right.
certain specific things. Unfortunately, the term has been coined to represent the right,
A
Right.
the
political
Republicans, the
ideology.
Republicans, the Republican ideology. Um, and then, of course, you have the Democrats, which represents sort of the liberal side of the aisle. But the thing about it is that the interpretation, and I agree with what's been said. It's interpretation, and unfortunately, what's written down on paper and how man interprets it can be two different things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the way it's gone on forever. If you read it on its face, it
Mm-hmm.
specifically calls it out. Unfortunately, and I go back to what Rose said earlier, the Constitution and its forget didn't address women at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so now you have to make adjustments, as with anything, because once again, man is not infallible.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we have to
Mm-hmm.
constantly, this is called continuous improvement. And unfortunately, because of the polarization of this country, and we're in a tribal situation right now,
Mm-hmm.
that's really become a daunting task. And so
Mm-hmm.
now the way things are handled, it seems like it's being handled in the courts more than it's being handled in the legislative
Mhm.
bodies.
Right.
So now everything gets bumped up to the Supreme Court because they're the court of the land. They're the ones who
Mm-hmm.
interpret the laws. And unfortunately, because of the outlook and the makeup of the current court where we are right now, um, they may pass a few things that seem fair to just say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, we threw you a bone, we threw you a carrot. But for some of the things such this as this term affirmative action, um, they missed the mark. And I mean, once again, that's just due to the fact of some people feel like they have arrived. And the thing about it is you got those that say, well, racism don't exist no more, so we don't need it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we should all know is a lie from the pit of
That's
hell.
all BS.
But
All BS.
okay, so
Okay. I mean,
again, go ahead, Rose.
no, I was just going to say what's interesting about any Supreme Court decision that on its face, it makes perfect sense. The reality is we've got people, as I've always said, you can legislate all you want to, but if the heart doesn't change, And see what you're ended up really doing is trying to legislate people's hearts, because sometimes they won't do what's right, even if it is right.
Right.
So you have to make the law, make them do what's right, only because they wouldn't do it in their own natural ability.
Any other way. Yep.
So that's kind of sort of what I can see with affirmative action, or with any court decision for that matter. You do the decision on surface when you're looking at the decision and looking at the court's opinion. It sounds very legitimate. It sounds like, well, we shouldn't be judging, people's applications based on race. That makes, on the surface, it makes absolutely perfect sense. The reality is, just the way you should not be judging people is the same way that we are sometimes judged on that very same thing. So you can say it, but your actions don't align with what you say. And that's what the court oftentimes has to fix, is that what people say and what they do don't always align. And that's what the court is supposed to be doing, is making sure that what's being said and done are all on the same plane. And that's not always what's happening, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. So back to my understanding of constitutional law. So Rob had said something that I think warrants clarity. So this, again, the Supreme Court's role is to address the Constitution. You have lower level Supreme Courts that address state issues.
And it's true.
So in my doing this research, there's what, 7 to 8 states that already abolished affirmative action altogether. And they didn't even have to go to talk to the Supreme Court about it. So so for me, I guess I'm now getting into this place. So I'm getting to where I'm trying to figure out, okay, what exactly is the Supreme Court supposed to be doing? Because you having them cross over into other areas that they were not intended to be in. But that's a whole nother, I feel like that's a whole nother conversation. But for this particular conversation, I said I did some research. So I needed to understand. So my first question was, okay, so we have the 14th Amendment. My understanding of the 14th Amendment, was that it was, no law was supposed to be created or made that would hinder life, liberty for everyone, regardless of your gender. And I remember, and I know you said it didn't say that no part of the Constitution said women. You were exactly right. It didn't say men either. Well, I think only one time it said all men were created equal.
Yeah.
Now that one time.
Well, but everything, every reference to it, and just because of that time period, would have only addressed men. That was just, so unfortunately the assumption is, well, we're only talking about white or men in general, white men in particular. So there was no need to define what everybody already knew what it meant. So, but it's only way down for people.
Right. But
so that's the whole idea of having amendments.
Right.
So then, but like you said, because everybody would realize, okay, well, we know what they wrote, but clearly, they were not thinking about. So let's back up. I'm sure when they were sitting around that table in 1776, they absolutely didn't think that Black people would be ever free. So again, so we realized 100% that no part of that Constitution was meant to be applied towards us. But what I say is, oh, sorry, not sorry, because if you were so bright, you were so smart, you would have been real specific that these laws, this Constitution, is only applicable to white men. Why they didn't do that, I have no idea. I feel like it might have been somebody sitting around the table going, now you ain't gonna be able to pull this off. You need to make it as broad as you can. I don't know. I'm just saying.
Not back then, because it was all about power and ego.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
And
right.
And
if they wrote, so ultimately they wrote it.
Yeah,
right. So ultimately they wrote it for themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
okay,
you,
right.
you got
I
you
get
got to
that.
pay attention. You got to pay attention at that time. So here's the thing:
Mhm.
is that because they were trying to break away from the tyranny of the king,
Mm-hmm.
that they felt that this was the best way to establish a republic, a government that was for the people, of the people, and by the people. That's what the originally was for. Um, so it made it seem like, well, look, we're just here to be representatives. We're here making this up. That's why the Continental Congress was made up of, well, it was all white people, white men. But
Mhm.
at that time, that's who was in
Ah,
position
right.
at that time.
Mhm.
They made it broad because I don't want to say that they were perhaps trying to be visionaries,
Mhm.
but at the same token, they realized they said we have to provide some liberties. That's why the Bill of Rights was put into place: the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, the freedom of press.
Bear arms and all
To
that.
because if they just had just made it so specific, it would have been really no different than being under a monarchy. So they
Mhm.
had to put some things in place, even though, and here's the thing is that it wasn't, I wasn't to say right, but you also had a class struggle because you have the affluent and the upper class and the learned people, but you still had those that were not as learned.
Right.
Everybody is not equal
Mhm.
in their background. You had some of them who had a pedigree that takes them back to England. Some of them were born in America. Some of them were not as of status as others. So taking that in effect, that's why they had to make it so broad. They said, and I mean, I would like to believe they said, okay, this is the way our country's going to be from this point on, but hopefully recognizing that there were going to have to be changes made over the course of time.
Mhm.
As we know, once again,
Mhm.
everybody, no person walking this earth is infallible.
Right.
Nobody, everybody, there's only one person that walked this earth that was perfect, that was Jesus.
Right.
So the thing about it is that now with affirmative action, it was done by executive orders,
Mhm.
but it was never made into an amendment.
Right.
Right. It wasn't made into a law. Right.
It was more or less a good faith understanding, like, okay, we need people, you need to start looking at diversity
Mhm.
with not just, so you had us, but then you also had Hispanics, you also have the
Mhm.
Asians. The Asians were coming over here in the 1800s to work. And so they had, so now you have all of these people who are now who have worked here and have raised
Mhm.
families and have
Mhm.
children. They're born in this country, so that makes them U.S. citizens. So
Mhm.
now you have all these people that are born. They aren't white. They're different nationalities. So
Mhm.
now they have to say, okay, you can't discriminate against these people. These people were born here or they're naturalized. They took that citizenship test and took the oath and everything like so now they're a naturalized citizen. So
Mhm.
because they're a citizen now, they get the rights that
Mhm.
anybody who was born in this country got. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, once again, you have those that will do anything they can to circumvent
Mhm.
Mhm.
anything that goes against what they
Mhm.
feel.
Mhm.
Mhm.
They will bend the law or they'll say, it's kind of like it's a play on words. It's a
Mhm.
play on words. And it kind of goes back to what Satan did in the Garden of Eden, where God told him not to eat of the tree of life, I mean, of knowledge of good and evil, otherwise you surely die. And then
Mhm.
the serpent comes and says, did God really say that?
Mhm.
You
Just
said, "Are
to
you gonna
sow
really
some
die?"
doubt,
Mhm.
just to sow some
Mhm.
doubt. So now you got people that read it and it's like, does it really
Mhm.
mean that? Does it
Mhm.
really
Mhm.
say that? So once
Mhm.
again, and because you have a lot of like-minded individuals on the Supreme Court at this place in time, and have been strategically been put in that position,
For life.
now they
Mhm.
get the chance to do some things that have been set, this is not something that just came about. This is something that was put into place decades ago.
Mhm.
They've been working on this for decades
Mhm.
to get people
So
in a position on that position
mhm,
to swing the pendulum to the way that certain people want it.
mhm, yeah, I could definitely believe that. Okay, so real quick, so affirmative action was an executive order. So I went from affirmative action to going, okay, well, what exactly is an executive order? And so here comes another level of confusion on my part, because I see here that an executive order is something written by by the president of the United States, and it says that the only person that can bring what is it can change
Veto.
an executive order is another president.
Mhm. Oh.
Mhm.
No, I didn't make this up.
Right.
so, so I'm back to confusion. If that is the case, if that's what they've stated, how is it that this even that it's even it comes before the Supreme Court to make a decision or ruling on?
Well, this kind of goes back, like I said, this is something that has been in motion for decades. This is a play. This was not something that was knee jerk or anything like that. This is something that was put in position and in play decades ago. And so what started from that particular time, over the course of time, you kind of dig yourself in and you reculture and you do things minor to make things move. Um, Here we are now, is that because it was so blatant and it just came out of nowhere that it was all the shock value. But if we had paid attention early on, we
Mm-hmm.
should have been recognizing. Uh, Clarence Thomas had been talking about being affirmative action being done over years ago.
Mm-hmm.
He had been talking about that years ago,
Mhm.
but because the makeup of the court would not allow him to put that in position, it was only until recently with the last administration that they could bring it to fruition.
Mm-hmm.
So this is
Well,
where we
I
are
don't know.
now.
Can y'all see? Because
But
on my screen I have this little box over that said, with the slide numbers. But can y'all see that last sentence on the slide about only a sitting U.S.
Mhm.
president?
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I was under the impression that it can be struck down by a majority of Congress.
Mhm.
Well, it says executive orders are not legislated is not legislation, so
Mhm.
they require no approval from Congress, and Congress
Mhm.
cannot simply overturn them.
Yeah, it takes a majority vote.
No, I think what there are ways they can work. They can circumvent it. They can just make a law
Mhm.
that in reality could override the executive order. Not even so much calling it overriding the executive order. They could just put in legislation that could circumvent the executive order,
Mhm.
or as they say here, as it rightly says, well, okay, you can go ahead and pass a law, but we'll just make sure you don't have any funding for it.
Mhm.
There's no teeth to your executive order.
Mhm.
So they
Mhm.
can find ways to circumvent an executive order by taking out. Normally, it comes right down to the money. They can take the teeth out of whatever you're doing. So
Mm-hmm.
you can
Mhm.
pass, just like I can pass a law saying, this is going to be executive order. This is Stevie Wonder's day. Well, no, okay, we'll make it Stevie Wonder Day, and then they'll go like, well, that's fine, but we're not going to give you any. We're not going to make it a federal holiday. We're not
Mm-hmm.
going to do whatever. We can make it so that it doesn't have to become, it doesn't have to be enforced in such a way. So that's the counterbalance, which is what government and the three branches of government is supposed to do.
It should be as a
Balance each
check.
other out. Right. They
Yep,
should
they
they, they
should
should be
check
checks
each
and
other.
balances. Right.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
But with affirmative action, I think that the crux of this whole thing is just that affirmative action came about because people wouldn't do what was right
Mm-hmm.
in the first place. That is
Mhm.
the whole, that was the whole
Mhm.
point of it, because left up to themselves, they would never hire or promote or even
Don't get
consider
done.
certain people. And that was the crux of most legislative acts, most legislative laws. You have to do the things just like they said, separate but equal. Well, on the surface, you're absolutely right.
Mhm.
No, we should not have to make accommodations for any particular group of people.
Right.
But we know that being separate automatically leads to inequality, because who's determined what's, if you don't have, unless you're doing apples to apples, you cannot say that it's equal. You cannot be separate and equal if you're not doing apples to apples. If I don't have the same new books that you get, if I don't have the same transportation that you have, if I don't have the same kind of schools that you have, you've already built in a disadvantage to a certain segment of the population, which is how Brown versus Board of Education ended up
Mhm.
overturning desegregation in the schools,
Mm-hmm.
because they realized you can't be separate and
Right.
equal when you don't have the same
And
exact
equal.
standards. Right.
Mm-hmm. So
Right.
thank
That's
you
where
for bringing
equity
that
comes
up.
in.
Yeah, that thank you for bringing that, because I was talking to my mother, and the high school that my mother graduated from in um, Kinston, North Carolina. Her graduating class
Mm.
was the last class before um, they integrated the school.
Mm.
And so I asked a question, and I guess the question I probably this the same question I asked her a couple of days ago. I probably could not have asked that question 50, 60 years ago, because because of the times and what was happening. So it's my understanding, excuse me, it's my understanding that the whole that the well, not the whole premise, but one of the reasons, or the primary reason why um integration was necessary, was because we were not there was no equality. We were not getting the same books that white students were getting, that their school, that we wasn't getting the same funding
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
that their schools were getting, and so on and so forth. We were So I don't know how many black people went to a white school to know all the specifics and what have you. But I fast forward to right now. So one of the things that sticks out to me, because we integrated, they said, okay, we're gonna let you come to school with us, but you're gonna learn what we say learn. And because now we have to learn what you say learn, is one of the primary reasons why we don't know that much about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So it was almost like we were damned if you do and damned if you don't. And so I went and I thought about
We know
like
about four
Harvard.
people. Four.
Huh? What about four people?
What did
What'd
you
you say,
say,
I
Vanessa?
Vanessa?
said we know about four people.
Oh,
I
oh.
said we know about four
Hmm.
people.
Hmm.
Martin
But
Luther King, Rosa Parks. Yeah, that's
Uh,
it.
book. Let's see. Was Peanut Guy, George Washington Carver,
Booker T.
hmm
Washington,
And Frederick Douglass.
Frederick
That's it.
Douglass,
Or and
right.
sometimes Harriet Tubman.
George
We got
Washington
the top
Carver.
five. You know.
Right, but
Yeah, yeah,
so now I fast forward to right now, and I thought
yeah.
about Harvard. And the reality of it all is, right, Harvard is no greater than the people who are in it.
Mm-hmm.
Harvard is where Harvard is because
Mm.
of what we have allowed Harvard to become. So I was like, well, gee, why we just can't go and build our own Harvard? If you have people who are exceptionally talented and gifted and what have you, why is it so important, right, that we get them into a Harvard? Because at the end of the day, you're gonna be talented and gifted no matter what school you go to. If you are destined for greatness, you're going to be great no matter where you go to. Why do I have to become part of the status quo, so to speak, right? into thinking that Harvard is all this, and so I must aspire to go to Harvard because nothing is better than Harvard. No HSBC is better than excuse me, HBCU is better
HBCU.
than Harvard. Um, and so I don't even look at nobody else's school. I only focus on Harvard. But if I never get there, if I never, so I'm talented and gifted. Um, if I never get there, Harvard's still gonna be what Harvard is. But if I go to someplace else, because I'm already destined to be talented and gifted, I'm still going to do that, even though I didn't go to Harvard. And so I don't know. I guess I was like, that there are things that we are fighting for. It's like there are things we are fighting for because we didn't have them. Um but also at the same time we were some of it we were led to believe that certain things were just better, that we just had to have them, that it was that it designated of something about ourselves. If I can put Harvard on my resume, then that means that I'm exceptional, does it? Because Rose, even you yourself said you work with a whole bunch of mediocrity every day, all day.
All day.
So,
And let me just say this. Go ahead, Rob. Go ahead.
yeah. So here's something that, unfortunately, because we live in a capitalistic society,
Right.
um, the achievement of going to a schools as prestigious as I say, maybe Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Brown, Columbia, um, gives credence and some level of what's the word I'm looking for?
Validity.
Yes, yes, that's the word. Saying, wow, they got that type of education. Unfortunately, we live in a society where status is still plays rampant. Because Letitia, I agree with you. There are some colleges out there that are not Harvard. They aren't Ivy League. That are very good schools.
Mhm.
You get a quality education from. But
Without
unfortunately,
breaking
let's
the
just
bank.
say I know a school in Pennsylvania that a friend of mine went to. Small school, got a quality education, but because it's not on the national stage, that it doesn't get the recognition. And unfortunately, you have to think back to what the mindset was, that if a person, and I won't say person, but if a person went to Harvard or went to Yale or went to Princeton, wow, they really have they got a quality education, because that is the visage that's put before. Unfortunately,
That's the
affirmative
assumption.
action was necessary because if, let's say, somebody achieved to go to Harvard. I mean, we all know that Obama and Michelle, they both went to Harvard, and so they're not the only ones. Justice Brown went to Harvard. So, and I think she's on the
Yeah.
board. That's why she had to recuse herself.
Mm-hmm,
So,
mm-hmm.
Mhm.
that's not to say that they couldn't have gone to school. I mean, Kamala Harris went to Howard, but that's not to say. But see, it's something about they wanted to make and say, okay, look, early on, it was always said that America's the great American melting pot. The Statue of Liberty, you have the Irish, you have the Italians, everybody come, please bring me you're wretched, you're tired. So you have immigrants, which America is fully made up of. I say outside the Native Americans. I mean, we aren't immigrants. I'm not putting us into that pot. We're different. We are a different thing. We were abducted, and I'm gonna say that, and I'll hold on to that. We are a people of descendants of abducted people.
Mm-hmm.
But nonetheless, you have some people that thought, okay, we have to show some level of diversity, because in this country, whether people like it or not, it's not made up of just white people.
Right.
And you're going to have to start realizing and understand and accept that there are other people who have the ability to do the same job that you do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we want to go back, I know we talked about some of the pioneers in Black history, but just think about all the inventions that have been put out by Black people.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we wouldn't have stoplights without
By
Garrett
black
Morgan.
people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't have the World Wide Web without the dial tone.
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't, these kids wouldn't have Super Soaker without an aeronautical engineer from
Exactly.
NASA.
Mhm.
So,
And so, Robin, to your point, are we not selling ourselves short?
well, I will say this: we in this country, as U.S. citizens, have the right, should have the right to attend any institution of knowledge we want to attend. It
Mm-hmm.
should not to be delegated and saying, "Oh, I'm Black, I can only go to an HBCU."
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be the case, perhaps the HBCUs don't have the program in place that they need to go for their education. This is not a knock against HBCU. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
HBCUs out there, but
Mm-hmm.
for, let's just say, for a course of work or the major that
Well,
they're going
they
for.
were born out of being shut out of places like Harvard.
Well, so that's the thing about it. So that's the reason why we even have colleges.
You
That's
know,
why we
if
even
you
have Tuskegee. That's why we have
yeah,
Hampton and Norfolk State and Old Dominion, because
right.
at that time we didn't have it. We remember the 14th Amendment, which should have
Mm-hmm.
really been the Affirmative Action Amendment.
Right. Right.
It should have been, but
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, once again, they circumvented it and said, "Yeah, that ain't. We gonna make sure that don't work for you."
Mhm.
And until because there was no enforcement, they just didn't. They just didn't. They just didn't. They just didn't want to do anything. So our people said, "Okay, since we can't go to your institutions, we'll make our own."
Mhm.
Right.
Uh,
As we
The thing
should have.
about it
That's
is,
how it was born.
that's how we built up our own wealth. You got
Right.
Rosewood, you had
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Black
Right.
Wall Street in Tulsa,
Yep.
but
Tulsa. Yep.
the thing about it is that
Every
that's
time we try to do
still,
something,
but the thing about it is we're a country, and
They
here's the
burn
thing
it
is that,
down.
and it's a country that we all have to live in, and so as a citizen,
Mm-hmm.
if I am a U.S. citizen, then I have the right, and I should
Mm-hmm.
have the right, to be able to get into a school such as Harvard. Now, granted, it shouldn't be because of my color.
right?
Right.
It shouldn't. It should be because
Mm-hmm.
I have done the work to get in there. But
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, once
Mm-hmm.
again, they try to circumvent the process.
Mm-hmm.
And
So,
then there's the other side of the act where you have what's called um, legacy
Right.
admissions.
And thank you. I was getting ready to say that. Thank you so much,
and
Rob.
and
Mm-hmm.
also, and then you also have those that, the parents or somebody and put some big money into the school.
mm-hmm.
Once again,
Mm-hmm.
capitalism reigns.
Mm-hmm.
We're a capitalist society. So that school's getting big money. So hey, pro quo.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
scratch my back, I give you this money. You let my child in.
Quit
Whether or
this
not the
or that.
child whether or not the child had done the work to
Right.
do that. So to make sure that there are people of color, of Black people, of African Americans, who have done the work and may not had that parent or been a legacy employee, they said we have to allow them in.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Dumb as
Let me say
rocks.
that. I mean, you have to allow them. You have to give them the opportunity to go to
Mm-hmm.
your school. That's what affirmative. See,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's where everybody thinks that you're forced to let people in. No,
Mm-hmm.
what
But
affirmative
you said
action
you
does.
considered.
Well, yeah, you have to
Right.
now be considered. Whereas before, it never would have been considered. I think about. I'm going to say this really quickly and then drop. So it's like the Rooney Rule in football,
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
because there were so many Black qualified, overqualified Black coaches who were not getting the opportunity to not only coach, they were even being interviewed. So now
Mhm.
what you have to do now, because
Right.
even though, and as we have seen this past year with Brian Flores from the Miami Dolphins, it's a farce in and of itself. They go through the motions of doing this. So even when they
Mm-hmm.
have, like I said, again, this is about the heart. I can legislate all day
Mm-hmm.
long, and I will interview as many black folks you want to parade through. I've already made up my mind who I want to hire. But I'm going to go
Mhm.
ahead and put on this little show, this little dog and pony show. I'm going to bring them
Right.
in, make it look like I'm giving them a fair shot, even
Mhm.
though I am not giving them a second thought because I already know who I'm going to hire.
Mhm.
And the thing is, familiarity is what people go by. Who you're most
Mm-hmm.
comfortable with. That's what we all do. We have an affinity for certain groups, for
Yeah.
certain people.
Yeah.
That's
Mm-hmm.
happening in our own personal lives as well as in our work lives.
Mm-hmm.
My
Mhm.
only issue is when you allow your affinity towards one part
Right.
or one segment of the population to affect my
Mhm.
well-being and my livelihood. Because
Mhm.
now because you're not comfortable with the way I look, you're not giving me the opportunity. But affirmative
Yes.
action,
Mhm.
in its truest sense, is saying
Mm-hmm.
you just cannot deny her just because she doesn't look like you or talk like you or
Mhm.
doesn't go to the same schools you go to or whatever you
Mm-hmm.
think it is that keeps you from giving me a fair shot. And
Mhm.
affirmative action may have gotten me in the door, but I got to keep myself in the building.
Mm.
So
Right.
and what they don't want to say is how affirmative action, they don't go for the person who's not going to represent them well. They're going to go for the top. So I don't care what they say, they're going to always try to pick the
Mhm.
prop so that they can at least say, well, if I got to hire you, I'm going to make you jump, as we say, be twice as good to be considered, work twice as hard to be considered half as good.
Mhm.
So that
Mhm.
kind of
Mhm.
that's what affirmative action looks like,
Mm-hmm.
depending on your point of view. But the bottom line is, affirmative action just made people say, I'm not going to allow you to openly and blatantly not look at these people, look at this group, this segment of the population because of your lack of diversity in your own personal life. I'm going to make
Mhm.
sure that you don't do that and be more representative of what the country looks like. So I'm sorry, folks, I got to go. Really
Rose, I
appreciate
love you. Thank you so much.
you guys. Great
Yeah,
spirited conversation. Hope we
look,
can get part two.
wherever you going, you
All
look.
right.
You can still just watch.
Okay.
um.
All right. You guys take
All
care.
right. I,
Thank
I
All
love
you.
you.
right. Nice
Appreciate
meeting
All
you,
right.
you.
Bye
Rose.
bye.
You know what? It's
Um.
like,
Yes.
all right, yeah. What what's going on? You look at this country right now, right? More and more people are having interracial uh
Relationships.
babies,
Yeah.
relationships and
Yeah.
babies. And
Yeah.
sooner or later, these people are going to grow up and they're going to fill the spots of position. Okay. When you have people, and I hate that we have to wait that long, but when you have people who have endured the struggle and understand the struggle, and then they're put in a position to make laws, that's what we won't need affirmative action anymore. Because you're going to have people in place that understand. It's just like the one thing that always gets somebody when they're on a presidential stump. Well, how much is a loaf of bread? And they get them on it because they have no idea. They're out of touch with reality. They're out of touch with your average everyday American. So these
Mm-hmm.
people, interracial, they're going to come across some type of racism because if you have an ounce of black blood in you, you're black.
You're black.
So they're going to feel it at some point in their life. Yes. And they're going to get into these powers or positions of power and make changes.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to make the changes that need to be made for us to have an equitable society. But until that happens, until you look at Congress, until you look at the Senate and it looks like America, nothing's changing.
So I'm sorry, Rob.
Okay.
Let me ask this question really quick. So over the past couple of weeks since SCOTUS made their ruling, what have you, I've listened to various conversations via YouTube and other platforms. And what I found to be really interesting, um, when they're all talking about affirmative action, they all, most of them lead off with various acts of discrimination not happening 60 years ago, happening today, right now. They say several. It's not one or two, and it's not just in nobody's school. Actually, colleges don't even come up. We talking about mortgage lending, and other things like that.
Mhm.
So
Redlining,
right. So when
all
you
that stuff.
when you when you still have various forms of discrimination occurring, they just, they just look different. So I mean, bottom line, which I would like this to be a future discussion. Any and everything that you apply for or have to provide your demographic information on gives that entity carte blanche to make a decision based on your ethnicity. So, in essence, yeah, that 14th Amendment means diddly. Affirmative action, the Civil Rights Act means diddly, because as long as I still have to tell you whether or not I'm male or female, whether or not I'm African or of African descent, I'm Hispanic, not Hispanic, I'm Asian, not Asian. As long as I have to give you all that demographic information stuff, that look, if you look at me, you 9 times out of 10 will see it. But nonetheless,
Or
as
your
long as I
name.
have to continue to, right, but long as I have to give you that information, I'm already setting myself up for you to make a judgment based on that. And so,
They
with
can do
that
that just
being
by
said,
name.
it's like these is and on top of which, I can't even prove that that's what you did.
Mm-hmm.
So the 14th Amendment means diddly. Um, Affirmative action means nothing, because if you just look at schools alone, if the minute, so they said you can't, they will no longer allow colleges to make a determination based on your ethnicity. Okay. Well, how about that not be on the application? How about that not be on the application? And when they have to do that essay, do not make any reference to how you had to pull yourself up from the bootstraps. Don't do that. So just because you
So,
pulled yourself up from the bootstraps doesn't make you an exceptional student. So let's not do that.
Yeah, but I mean, you can
so
still
Um,
say that,
as
but
a,
sometimes they have like names that are considered white and names that are considered black, and they can still do it without you giving them gender, race. They can still do it.
right,
They
right.
still have what,
Because
like,
why?
your word.
Because they're gonna
Still
look at where you live.
convinced.
So they're making assumption. But what they're doing is making assumptions. Because I know some Beckys who
Hmm.
are not white.
I
I know some
know,
Beckys.
but you have an
I know some
overwhelming
Beckys who are not
majority
white.
of them that are. If we're gonna go by
So
percentages.
they're gonna they're gonna make assumptions. That I think they'll look at where, so your name is Becky. So your name is Becky Jones. So you could or could not be white. Now I'm gonna look where you live at. Well, now if you live in the hood, you're probably a black Becky and not a white Becky. Um, there's too much information that leads in ahead of you.
Hmm.
But so the content of your character don't even come into play, really.
Mm,
I
hmm.
get so
Hmm.
far down on the list. I'm sorry, Bob, what you gonna
so
say?
yeah, so I remember when I was taking my SATs years ago, and the one thing I have to say is that the SAT, the reading comprehension piece is biased. The math is universal. You just can't change math. You just
Right.
can't change it. But
Yeah,
the
numbers is
reading
numbers.
comprehension, the reading comprehension
Mhm.
is biased. I was fortunate enough to go to a prestigious high school in Baltimore,
Mhm.
um, where I got college. It was college prep. I went to a college prep school. I'll never forget. When I was in middle school, my junior high school counselor called my mom up to the school, wanted to have a talk, said, Ms. Kenner, look, we looked at Robert's GPA and his academic record, and they took the liberty of sending it to this high school. It's called Baltimore Polytechnic Institute. It's a
Mhm.
very prestigious school. It had a very long legacy. And they had desegregated 2 years before Brown versus the Board of Education. So they had the vision to see we got to make a change.
Mhm.
But so I benefited from going to that type of institution. Now, the other thing about affirmative action, now from a job perspective, when my first job, that's how I got it. I was the only
I'm
black
sorry,
engineer.
Rob. So your application was sent to this school.
Yeah,
You
I was
say
accepted.
because of affirmative action,
Well,
or
no, no. So in high school, it was sent because of my GPA,
okay, okay,
because it was outside of my zone. So I had
okay,
to take
okay,
a placement test and everything. But
okay,
that was because of that. I was just saying that for colleges, for the SAT, it's those tests are pretty biased.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Unfortunately, you have a lot of our people who are very intelligent
mm-hmm,
and have bypassed those things and been able to make it. But now, they have the SAT, they have the ACT, and those tests aren't working anymore. Because
yes,
that was
but
another
I
way. That
I
was another
never
way.
I never took an SAT, and I have a master's, so yeah,
But
yeah, I already know my score to get.
now to go back to the conversation on affirmative action, but outside
Mhm,
of the school setting, my first
mhm,
job, that's how I got my
Yeah.
first job as an engineer. I was the only black engineer in the company,
mhm.
the only one. And I can't even tell you the struggles I went through
And
being the
so,
only
okay, so
black
wait, so
engineer.
so let's stay right there. So you got that job because of affirmative action.
Yeah, yeah,
And what you're saying, did you apply for that job?
yeah.
Okay, and you
I got
feel
it through my
you believe?
school. I got it through my
Huh?
school. I
Oh,
got it
okay,
through my
okay.
school. And when I went for orientation, there was no other black engineers. Now, I can tell you the
Mm.
challenges I went through being an engineer for those first couple of years. I would
Mm-hmm,
show up to a job
mm-hmm,
and the people were like, "You sure you know what you're doing?"
mm-hmm,
And I can
Mm.
tell you a real life situation where I
mm-hmm,
had to fix a system at
mm-hmm,
a PGA golf course in Potomac, Maryland. And I showed
mm-hmm,
up to fix it, and the guy looked at me and said, "Well, deliveries are around back."
mm-hmm,
Mm.
mm-hmm,
So so dealing with it. But now I will say this to my president, to my upper management's effort, they really
mm-hmm,
invested in me and stood by me
mm-hmm,
throughout that whole thing. I remember one time I almost got thrown out of Hilton Capital because they didn't think I belonged there. I was
mm-hmm,
there to fix a system in accounting and told them so,
Mm.
and they were ready to throw me out. They didn't
mm-hmm,
believe me. But
mm-hmm,
just that I say this, and you bring up a valid point. You bring up a huge valid point. The 14th Amendment, because of the nature of man, because the nature of man
mm-hmm,
is what causes things not to be followed. But I'll say this: since you got a lot of people in this country that say that this is a country based on Christianity, which it really isn't. But let's just go to the Word of God. James 2:1 says, "My brother, show no partiality as you hold the faith in our Lord Jesus Christ, the Lord of glory." So here's the
mm-hmm,
thing: no partiality. This is coming from God,
mm-hmm.
because
Mm.
God doesn't
Nobody.
see us in our body. He doesn't see us by our color.
Right,
He's
right,
looking at the heart of man.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So God, now, once again, you got those that profess Christianity, they profess
Mm-hmm.
to follow Christ. So
Mm-hmm.
now you got the word of God in this.
Mm-hmm.
He says, show no partiality. So you're going against what God says. So
Mm-hmm.
what does that say about you?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm only talking about the ones who profess
Right.
Christianity.
Right.
All of them don't do that. They on the surface, everybody in their mind say, well, I'm a Christian. Yeah, you sure about that?
Mm-hmm.
But that's the
Mm-hmm.
word of God. That's the word of
Mm-hmm.
God.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm. Um, I can't think of this reporter's name. Uh, but she's a black reporter. I think she's on CNN. But she talked about how um I get she lived in the Midwest, and she said she was one of the nerdy kids, had really high grades and so on and so forth. And she said a recruiter came all the way out there to the Midwest to her school to recruit her for Harvard. And so
Joy
she,
Reid, Joy
is that her
Reid,
name? Yeah,
Joy Reid's
MSNBC.
on
Joy Reid.
MSNBC.
I
yeah.
know.
And
That's what I
so
said. The MSNBC. Yeah.
yeah, and so she basically said that she got into Harvard because of affirmative action. Now
Mm-hmm.
what I heard was a snippet. So I didn't hear the entire
Mm-hmm.
conversation. So correct me if I'm wrong. Did she or did she not apply to Harvard? Because the clip that is shared
It was like she was
does not
recruited.
indicate doesn't
Mm-hmm.
indicate that she actually applied.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
in the clip that is shared, she says that um had it not been for this recruiter coming out there to her school and finding little old her, right,
Mm-hmm.
nobody would have known nothing about her. And
Mm-hmm.
so my immediate question was, so did you or did you not apply?
Right. Right.
Because
I don't
this
remember hearing that she applied.
right, because the story would
Mm-hmm.
be different if she had actually applied,
Mm-hmm.
if she actually had a desire to actually go to Harvard. She
Mm-hmm.
doesn't give, she doesn't, it doesn't sound like, that she was even thinking about Harvard. So
Sound more like
Harvard,
filling a quota.
right. So Harvard came all the way out there to her school to go, to your point, to both of y'all point, y'all said that, at the end of the day, they're gonna take the best, the best of the best.
Mm-hmm.
So so you figure maybe this recruiter went out there to her school and said, okay, I want to meet with all your top students.
Mm-hmm.
So, but she didn't even want to go to Harvard. So is it that affirmative action was applied because technically that recruiter would have never went out there to that school to even look for it?
Hmm. Good question. I know one thing she did add was when she said when she got there, she was smarter than a whole lot of them people.
No, but she said that first year was rough.
Yeah, but
Hmm.
she was smarter than a whole lot of those people, and she's talking about those other people.
Hmm. So
Yes.
I
Hmm.
think this I still I still don't know that I'm going to join everyone and be up in arms about it, because I do feel like that, based on what was it, 1965, when affirmative action was um a second executive order was put into place right behind
The
the
Civil
Civil
Rights
Rights
Act.
Act of 1964.
Mhm.
uh I understand the need during that time, and I'm
Mhm.
not. I don't know that I can say unequivocally that there's still the same need now, because um our problems are so systemic that again, affirmative action, what Affirmative action wasn't circumventing the systemic problems that were birthed out of our plight. And so it's like I it lends to the whole notion of being woke, because at the end of the day, we all know that they allow certain things to be put in place, and it gives us the impression that we have arrived, or that we have accomplished something, or that they gave us something, or that we that much more better for it. And let me just clarify, when I say they, I am absolutely not talking about all white people. I'm talking about white power.
Mm.
So now, so I need to clarify, because there is a difference. That everything that we talking about is all white power. It is all that very small, tiny group of people,
Mm-hmm.
the individuals, right, who control the money and the power. So
Mm-hmm.
they're
One
the ones
percenters.
that, yeah, with the 1%ers, right? They're the ones
Mm-hmm.
that control that do all of this. And so they, every now and again, they let us have a little something, and make us think, that we have these gains. And so I can't help but think that right now, with the Supreme Court overturning affirmative action in the colleges, right, that is a distraction from something else. Because truth be told, right, there's still that you're just being considered. You're not even guaranteed. And then on top of that, if you can't cut the mustard, you ain't gonna end up being there anyway. So it's like, it's like, we fighting for, what are we really fighting for? Because the thing that we think that we're fighting for is really not the thing. I like my friend Jackie says, the thing that we think is the thing is really not the thing.
Mm-hmm.
The thing, what we want, what we really want, is what we're not really fighting for.
Mm-hmm.
We fighting for other things, like Rob said. You talked about status. We have bought into the notion of what of status, and what it looks like to be a successful American. We have bought into that notion to our detriment.
Mm-hmm. All the way
um
down to name brands.
we have bought into it to our detriment, to the point that we are killing each other, and
Mm-hmm.
killing killing each other, and we missing it.
So
Mm-hmm.
I
we,
want to
we
say,
can
so I agree, because here's the thing is, there's some problems internally that we have to resolve.
Mm-hmm.
There's a division. See, I always say that there's not just a racial struggle, but there's also a
Mhm.
class struggle.
Yeah.
And when unfortunately some who feel that they have arrived,
Mm-hmm.
have forgotten or lost sight of those who may not have arrived yet.
Yeah.
Now, I say this. So right now, the few people that are passing these things, that's a generation that's going to pass, because the current generation of today is more global,
Mm-hmm.
more
Mm-hmm.
accepting, more
Mm-hmm.
indoctrinated. In fact, they
Mm-hmm.
they adopt our culture, as as
Mm-hmm.
as my sister said earlier. The makeup of America is different.
It's
There's
changing,
a
the
Mm-hmm.
browning of America.
lot,
It
there's a
is. Yep.
lot of interracial couples out there
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
on both sides.
Yep.
And
Mm-hmm.
here's the thing, some of those people in Congress got interracial grandbabies.
That part.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So here's the
And
thing
Rob,
is that,
we say multi-ethnic.
okay,
Multi-ethnic.
We say, yeah,
multi-ethnic.
we say,
Well,
because
okay,
it's only
well,
one
here's the
race.
thing.
There's
We're
a
not,
human race. There we go.
we're not going to be able to go back to what they thought it was going to be, or what was coined as a phrase, make
That's
America
right.
great again, because
Mm.
it was never so. Make America great again, guess who it was great for? Because in their
Mhm.
Never
mindset,
great for the
that's what
black
it
man.
should have been. But unfortunately, we're not going to be able to go back. Why?
Right.
Because the generation of today
Mm.
who have seen these injustices happen, and the generation of today, the
Mm.
millennials, they are paying attention.
Mm.
They're paying attention. You got a
Mhm.
few that are conservative. You got a few that go that way and then indoctrinated because, and so be it. I don't really have a problem with somebody saying the Democrat Republican.
Mm.
My problem is, what do you stand for?
Right.
Right.
That's
Who are
just a
you at
name.
your
That's
core?
just that's just a name. That's just a
Right.
Mhm.
that's just
Mhm.
a title. That's just a categorization.
Mhm.
What do you really stand for?
Mhm.
Because you have some people on the Republican side who really don't really stand for that. They just that their outlook and
Mhm.
their things about policy are a little different than
Mhm.
what the Democratic side is.
Mhm.
But the thing about it is that it has become so polarized. But and the thing about it, the more you try to separate, the more resistance comes and brings it together.
Mm.
Mhm. Mhm.
And this generation of today have bought into the music, have bought into
Mhm.
the culture, have
Mhm.
bought. They don't want to be separate. They
Right.
Mhm.
want to be together.
Yep.
Mhm.
And after all of what some of these children have gone through and seen,
Mm.
they
Mhm.
realize we all in this together.
Right.
So that's a fear that
Mhm.
the older generation has.
Yes.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
they're trying to hold, this is their last gasp
Yep.
of trying to hold on to something
Yeah.
that eventually is going to die out.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? In the grand scheme of things, if you just stop and think about it, you do you know? My mom said, "Do you know how smart you got to be?" She says, "Do you know how smart you got to be to call somebody stupid?" So I say that to say, how in the world did you think that you was going to be able to come over here to another part of the globe and bring other people over here? Because at the end of the day, you knew exactly who you were getting.
Mm.
Whether you chose to acknowledge that we were human or not, you knew. But in order to further your cause, you had to say that we were not. You had to teach other people that we were not. But how in the world did you think that you was going to be able to bring people from a whole nother continent, the richest continent on the globe,
Mm.
and all these years later, keep it just white? How
You
you thought you
you
was going to
you
do that?
said the thing. It was all about money.
Mm.
Mhm.
That's what it was really all about. It was all
And
about money.
Yeah,
power.
but it
Yeah.
was always about greed, money,
And
greed,
Yeah,
and power, and
it was
they
mhm.
always
got
about.
blinded because realistically speaking,
Mhm.
ain't no way in the world you thought you was going to bring these people over here and bring them over here. On top of which, you were sleeping with them and
Yes.
making babies. So
You you
what you thought? Like
you already
eh,
started the
exactly,
multicultural movement.
they
You
were
started the
blinded.
multicultural movement.
Exactly.
Well,
They were
I say this.
blinded. They were blinded by greed, money, and power.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, man is the architect of his own demise.
Oh,
Mhm.
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Look,
Yeah, but
I'm gonna
until
cry. I'm gonna cry on that.
until the face of power changes, this is where we are.
Hmm.
But once it does, and the people who know the struggle or know the ones that want to come together, who want to unify, who know the wrongs and are going to follow their heart the way God intended,
Hmm.
that's when things are going to change.
Hmm.
But right
But
now, yeah, we still
mhm.
got the money hungry, uh, powerful one percenters who
Well,
they honestly they don't
but
think
I
they're going to
think,
die off. They don't think
but
they're going to die.
I definitely think that I definitely think that the world is shifting.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, it probably is not going to happen
In our lifetime.
in our lifetime.
Don't
But
say that.
at the
Don't put that in
end of
there.
the day, it's up to us to plant seeds.
Yeah, definitely. We
It's
got to
up to
start
us
by
to
teaching
plant
them our
seeds.
history.
Right. Right. You know, educating and so on and
Mhm.
so forth, and being willing to be transparent, but also I think understand who your enemy is,
Mm.
because like I said, it's not all white people.
Mhm.
Our enemy, that population is really really small.
Mhm.
And the sooner we realize how small that population is, the better, because they are a minority.
Mhm. Mhm.
They've been a minority for an
Mhm.
extremely long long period of time.
Yeah.
But I think everyone of color, again, back to that whole notion of being woke, you have to understand that as long as I can keep as long as they can keep us all fighting each other,
Mhm.
every other ethnicity
Mhm.
doing this, right? Then they don't have nothing to worry about.
Yeah. Sit back and watch the fight.
Exactly.
And the real and the thing about it is, once again, in the black community, we have some things to fix.
Mm-hmm.
We have to
Absolutely.
fit. We have some things because, and they know that once we come together, look out. Because look, once
Mm.
again, once when we came together and we had our own communities and I had our
Mm-hmm.
own businesses and our own things,
Mm-hmm.
Black Wall, and we're prospering,
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
not just having it, but
Mm-hmm.
Rosewood,
Mm-hmm.
a Black Wall. So
Mhm.
so
Mm-hmm.
they
Yeah, and there was several Black Wall Streets. It wasn't just one.
Yes. Yes. Not
but
just
the thing
Tulsa.
about
Yeah.
but the thing about it is that we supported it. We were a community. We were a community that supported each other. And unfortunately, that is something, as some have gotten into, have become people of status
Mm-hmm.
and then moved
Mm-hmm.
on, and because you got a fair share of black Republicans out there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a fair share of them
Mm-hmm.
that believe in that. I mean, they're out there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and because they're saying, "Well, I got mine, you got to get
Mm.
yours."
Right.
Mm.
That part.
Mm.
And sometimes, and here's the thing, is that God wants us to help each other. That's what
Mm-hmm.
we're here for. We are
Mm-hmm.
really here
Mm-hmm.
to help
Mm-hmm.
each other. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, now from a community's perspective, yeah, we need to help each other, but we need to
Mm-hmm.
be able to help people. Period. I mean,
Right.
it is imperative
Mm-hmm.
that those that are of position and authority do not abuse their
Yeah.
position and authority, but use that for the general welfare of those
Yeah.
that are not able to.
Right.
Right.
That's what it's really for.
Right.
Unfortunately, it's become a radio station, WIIFM. What's in it for me?
Mhm.
Mm.
Or they're
Mm.
looking for, if they help you, they're looking for a return on their investment,
Yep. Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
not just for altruistic reasons of saying, "Hey, I'm here to help you. Don't worry
Yeah.
about it. I'm not
Right.
looking for anything in return. I'm just here to help you."
Yeah, the question is asked by that younger generation when we tell them about the things that we when we did come together, the things that we had accomplished, all the multiple um, Black Wall Streets and what have you. Um, and they ask, well, what's the problem? Why we can't do it again, and what have you. Um, I find myself having to explain to them, you have to bear in mind when that occurred. These are people that were up from slavery. They were able to come together, because they remembered where they came from. They remembered what the struggle was. They remembered everything that they had lost, everything that had been stripped from them, everything that they were deprived of, the loss of their land. They knew all of that. They remembered all of that. It was only it wasn't even that many generations up from when they first came over, when their people first came over on those ships. So it was easy to band together and build these multiple Black Wall Streets. Now here you are, 400 plus years later. We so far removed that we forgot.
Mm-hmm.
And like Rob said, now we it's all about self. We act like we operate. We're trying to operate in these silos, independent of each other, without realizing that if I win, you win.
Mm-hmm.
If I fail, you fail.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you might want to think that you solo in that thing, but I promise you that you're not. But I think, I think that it's up to us, to remind that generation, take ownership for the mess up, because we didn't get where we are solely because of white power.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it was our own doing.
Yeah.
But it was because of the things that we were taught, i.e. Willie Lynch. But it's a whole nother
Go
conversation.
another one.
Yeah, that's
That's a whole nother conversation.
You know what?
That's too deep for a Sunday.
Yeah. If we could take a page. If we could take a page out of the Latino and Asian book,
Mhm.
how they pull together their funds. And they'll come up like 15 deep in a house, put all their money together, buy a house. Then the next person, all their money together until everybody owns a house, or everybody's got a nail shop, or everybody, whatever.
Not a nail shop.
A
Right.
home or whatever. And they do it together because they pull together. They're not far removed from the struggle. Okay. They're coming from another country to here. Some of them are born here, whatever. But I'm talking about the immigrants that are coming now, how they pull together and do. And we'll be like,
but I mean, but think about it. I mean, you can give them that credit and what have you. And that's fair. But bottom line, the only reason why they can do that, because they have not been indoctrinated like we have been. Oh,
they know their history. They were not stolen. They came here voluntarily. They were not abducted.
Exactly. This thing that we got, it run deep.
Yes.
We are people who are still trying to figure out our identity. Because and go back to in the early 1800s, when there were some black slaves that were free, that became freedmen, and they were like, well, we got to get these black people out here, because the other slaves see these free black people, these free people of color, then they're going to be wanting their freedom. So now they were like, well, let's send them back to Africa. Well, you can't just send us back to Africa. You can't just send us back, because we're not going. I mean, you can't expect. I mean, that's how Liberia and Sierra Leone were established. But you can't send a group of people who have been indoctrinated and institutionalized by what they have been taught, because you took their culture away from them. You took their identity away from them. You took their tribe away from them. You took anything that they could have related to from their past in the old world. You took it away from them, and you tried to make them and mold them into what you wanted. So now here it is. You can't just send us back to Africa. It don't work that way. We don't have that type of ties or any type of connection outside of just being descendants. But you can't expect that. And that's what happened. They sent black people back to Africa, but it ended up they didn't reintegrate into the local tribes. They didn't speak the language of those local tribes. They built up cities and communities based on their way on where they learned. And now with the situation in Florida, where they want to change the way slavery is being taught, and saying now that slavery was actually good for slaves because they learned skills. And I'm like, yeah, okay,
I'm so
yeah.
done with DeSantis. I don't know what to do with myself.
You
That's
know,
a whole nother show.
but you know, they're trying to rewrite their history because
Yeah.
they don't want to feel bad about it. Well, you didn't do that back then, so why should you feel
Mhm,
bad about it? But history is history, what it is.
mhm,
Unfortunately, in specific times, history is written by the victors, by the
mhm,
victors, not the
mhm,
victims. It's written by the victors. So history can be rewritten, but
mhm.
however, true
That's why it's
history
his
is going to
story.
come out.
His
True history is going to come
mm,
out. And whether
yeah,
they realize it or not, there's enough resources on the internet and everything else to get the real truth.
Mm.
that's
They
right.
can ban all the books they
That's
want.
right.
You can go to Internet Archive.
Mhm,
You can go to Project Gutenberg. You can download. You
mm,
can go to, whether you go to your local library or go to a library online, those resources are available now. We are in a global society now. The
mhm.
information, as we call it, well, we used to call it information superhighway when it first started out. But yeah, I'm aging myself. I tell a lot. I tell a
Hello, we
lot.
right there with
We're
you.
there.
I
We
tell a
right
lot.
there
I
with
tell
you,
a lot
boy.
of the young generation. I started in IT before the internet became a thing.
Yeah.
Mm,
So now
Back in the
everything,
IBM days, huh?
yeah.
everything is online. And they
AOL.
can't, no matter what you say, you can try to restrict sites and everything else, but somehow, some way, the information is going to get out there.
Mhm,
Mhm. The
mhm,
only thing is you have to have people that have the desire to research. There are some people that
mhm.
sit and would rather be fed,
Right.
and you could feed them anything, and
Mhm,
then
Well,
that's what they'll spread.
mhm, mhm,
unfortunately,
mhm,
that's what the
mhm,
situation is. It takes,
Hmm.
and it takes a shift in the mindset and getting an
Yes.
epiphany. It does. It really does. But
mhm,
um, there is enough out there, and Vanessa, you really hit the head on that statement. They don't want to. They want to be taught. I remember a book called Animal Farm, written
Hmm.
by George
Hmm.
Orwell.
Hmm.
And so it was tied to the way communism was being so I read the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx some time ago. But Stalinism in Russia took what they said communism and made it into a form of what they want. But the animals came together for socialism and communism. Communism is just community. If you
Hmm.
look at the word communism,
Communism, root
community and
word.
commune comes from. That's
Yeah,
where it
mhm,
comes from.
it's the root
It means
word.
everybody shares.
Yep.
mhm,
Everybody shares. That's what it really was. And so when the animals came together and they came up with those 10 rules on the side of the barn, the pigs who were deemed the most intellectual
Hmm.
at that time, well, you had two leaders. You had Snowball and you had Napoleon. Snowball reflected Trotsky. Napoleon represented Stalin. Napoleon, I mean, Snowball was trying to make everybody equal.
Mm.
mhm,
But when you got to the sheep couldn't remember everything. And one of the rules on the side of the barn was that no animal will walk on two legs. So it
mhm.
was four legs good, two legs bad. And that became the mantra that the sheep go to. So now you have a bunch of people who are to being the sheep because that's what they were told. That's
Mm.
what they were said. And they don't want to really think
Wow.
about it. They want to be told, they want to be told what to say, what to do, what to follow, and everything like that.
Yep.
And they don't want to think. That's the thing about it. A lot of people don't want to think anymore. But
Mhm,
unfortunately for them, you have those of this new generation that do.
mhm,
They're
mhm,
open. They want to
Hmm.
research.
mhm,
These children, this generation are politically active, and it scares the
mhm,
bejesus out of those who can't
mhm,
control them.
mhm. Well, I wanna add to what y'all saying as far as the wealth of information that is out there. Um, yes, it's important to one have the desire to want to know and to do the research, but at the same token, there is so much information out there, you're going to need some people who will be able to tell you what is accurate and what's not accurate. Because that's the
Mhm.
other problem, is that it's so much information. They're bombarded with so much information that now, if you don't already, you already don't know your history.
Mm.
So now you're getting fed all of this stuff. And so now you got to sit there and figure out what part of it is accurate and what part of it is not. And there is nobody
Right.
to tell you what part is accurate and what part is not.
Mhm. But that's how you learn
That's
research. You learn to research.
and
You have to come up with reputable sources
Mhm.
and find out where the majority of corresponding information is
Mhm.
to stop the misinformation.
Mhm. But see, I think that's why scholars, such as yourselves now, that's why scholars, right, who have I absolutely agree, that is imperative that we do our necessary research. But again, I think it's a partnership, in that um you still need those scholars to be able to tell, to help you disseminate what is good information versus what is bad information. What are good sources versus
Mhm.
what is bad sources? Because look, everybody got an opinion.
mm,
Everybody think that they are an authority on a whole lot of stuff. I started off my
Right.
podcast saying I'm not an authority on nothing. Got questions. I got questions, and I believe in doing some research, right? And I don't make claims to anything.
Right.
But I am willing to listen. I'm willing to be guided and directed, and I don't take nothing on face value. You tell me something, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna look it up, and if it's wrong, what we about to have a debate.
Mhm.
um,
there's a proverbs, and there's a line in proverbs says the people perish for a lack of knowledge.
yes,
Mhm. Mhm.
that's it.
So that the thing about it is that if you have a thirst, for knowledge, and once again, I agree with both of you said, you have to consider the source.
Yes.
Because unfortunately, you got somebody out there saying 2 + 2 = 5 when you know in your heart 2 + 2 = 4. But if you keep
Mhm.
saying, and that's the unfortunate, you said bombarded, that's a huge statement, Alicia.
Mhm.
Bombarded by things. So, it's like there's another book by George Orwell, 1984,
Mhm.
Remember that one?
where they were saying 2 + 2 = 5, which became a corn phrase. But in the heart, everybody knew that 2 + 2, well, you take two fingers and it gives you four. But because they were being bombarded so much, they were either getting fatigued,
Mm-hmm.
or they knew that to think was going to cause them to lose their so-called freedom of that time.
Mm-hmm.
So they just allowed it to be.
Yeah.
And that's the unfortunate thing, is that you got some people that have been fatigued by the overload
Mhm.
of information.
Yeah.
But here's the other thing, is that you have to really pay attention, because the truth itself is linear. The truth itself is doesn't change. The truth is what the truth is. It's just that when you start hearing alternative facts,
Mm.
when you start hearing
Mhm.
terms like that,
Yeah.
that's when you have
Yeah.
to worry. And that's what should drive you to pay more attention to what you're being fed.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um,
And you want to see that in live action? You watch that guy Jordan Klepper
mm,
from the Comedy Central
yeah,
with any
it was
MAGA
the
Republican.
Daily Show. Yeah.
OMG. It
Mm-hmm.
is amazing. And, they'll ask them questions and it's like, this is documented stuff. And like, well, where do you get that from? Or who told you that? Or, well, I watch Fox News. I'm like, that's the problem.
Yeah.
But, he
Mm-mm-mm.
started all of this so long ago, like before
Yeah.
the just to show how misinformation gets started, or how the repetitive, if you lie enough to the uninformed or uneducated, they're going to believe it. And then it grows, it swells, and it turns into something bigger than you could ever imagine. That's what we're going through right now.
Yeah.
Even though
Yeah.
they're in the minority, they're still in
Mm-hmm.
the minority. in the minority, but their voices are so loud that they can make other people think that they're in the majority.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yep.
But
because
it,
people aren't talking to each other, they're talking at each other.
exactly.
Right.
And
Yes.
here's and once we go when we're going back to this conversation on affirmative action, at its face value,
Mm-hmm.
and actually all in all, once you go back, if you look at the once you go back to the 14th Amendment, if the 14th Amendment was actually followed as it was being written, you
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't need to have affirmative action. If
Right.
you
Exactly.
know, if a person could be credited for their achievements and what they've been able to do and what they've been able to achieve in their academic life, then yeah, they should be able to get in. But unfortunately, once again, I say this, man is fallible. And the
Mm-hmm.
heart of man, it can be a
Mm-hmm.
hard thing to change until they get some level of epiphany, like Paul did on the they have a come to Jesus meeting with like Paul did on the road to Damascus,
And
where
aha moment.
he was a hardcore he was a hardcore Pharisee.
Zealot.
He was a zealot
Yep.
until he had that come to Jesus meeting, and then he got the epiphany and got changed his whole mindset.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it takes for some of these. It's going to take for some of these people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's going to
But
take something so drastic for them to realize, like, may I've been wrong. But
but
it's
you know
hard for
what?
man. It's hard for people to
To
admit they're
admit
wrong.
that part. That's what's going to be
Mm-hmm.
so hard because even if they feel it in their heart right now with all these indictments, they don't
Hmm.
want to admit it. There are so many of them that unless they've been indicted as well,
Mm-hmm.
then they'll,
Mm-hmm.
hey, he told me to do it.
Mm-hmm.
He put out the
Well,
call.
because what they say, because they said the truth hurts.
Yeah.
You've been people been telling you, right? This man crazy.
Yeah.
He's doing this and he doing that, but you was die hard all about him. He was
But
die hard
Vanessa,
about it. And
but
so now you would have to you would have to take ownership. Man,
To know
I
that you
got
would
I
do it.
got.
And you
well,
sent them that
the
you
truth
kept
the
sending
truth
them
hurts.
money.
Right.
The
You don't
truth
want to
hurts,
sit
but
there and
it
say,
also
"Oh man, I
heals.
got."
Mm.
The truth hurts, but it also
Mhm.
heals.
Mm.
But you have
Hey,
to want it. You have to
You had
want
to
to hear the
want it.
truth. The
hey,
truth can hurt, but it also heals.
Yeah.
Because the
well,
one way or another,
I
the truth
think
is going to come out. So
I
Yeah.
think it's what is it? I think it's human nature.
Hmm.
Um, it's either human or I dare go as far as say it's actually an animal instinct, right? To want to avoid pain
Mm.
at any cost. So we get it.
Hmm.
We absolutely get it, but it's what you said on the Rob, on the flip side, right? That there is a healing after that pain. Listen, guys, this is I look, I this was good. So look, we could talk for hours. We still have um 7 people still watching, and so
Thank you,
I
everybody.
appreciate you all
Yes.
hanging in. You know that we went well past our regular 60 minutes.
Yeah.
But I did say at the beginning that I doubt that this is a 60-minute conversation.
Hmm.
That it would absolutely be 90, but we trying to push the 2 hour mark, and
Mm.
I don't want to do that. I want to be respectable and conscious of your time. But yeah, this was good. And clearly it was a conversation that needs to be had. I think so usually we have a lot of comments, and I think that our audience was just so enthralled and captivated by the conversation that they probably was like me, taking notes and just learning, and probably gathering some information to go do their own
Mm.
research
There were a
about a
few.
thing.
There were a few
Huh?
comments. I said there were a few
Yeah, yeah,
comments.
they, yeah,
Yeah, but
yeah, but I for the number of people
mm,
who was in there, I was actually expecting to see more comments, but
mm,
nonetheless, um, I said these conversations are geared to getting us to think.
Mm.
Um, think about things. Question the status quo. Don't be a bandwagoner.
Mm.
um, you
What's
know,
your new
but
word?
huh?
I said,
You
what's your
see,
new word?
right? Don't be a bandwagoner.
Bandwagoner.
Just cause everybody don't like it, don't mean you supposed to not like it too. Right? Find out why they don't
Right.
like it. Right?
Right.
Do they have a legitimate reason? To be up in arms. I will say after this conversation, I've learned a lot. Uh, I again, I'm not. I don't know. And I think it's because uh, we see below the surface,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's because we can see below the surface that I can't I can't embrace what everybody else is embracing up top, because everybody's embracing what's up top and they really haven't taken the time to investigate what's underneath, what's below the water that you can't see,
Mm-hmm. Like an
what's really
iceberg.
right. Exactly. What's really going on. So I'm not saying that affirmative action is not necessary. What I'm saying is, don't allow yourself to get so caught up in this uproar that you miss something, um,
Mhm.
and that you don't take the necessary work to dig deeper and find out exactly what it is that you just supposedly have lost. Because maybe you really didn't lose anything. Maybe this is an opportunity for us all to do better, to to rise above some things, to make some folks accountable. Um, for some things. Maybe this is an opportunity for us to actually galvanize for something. Now how about really fight for something? You was fighting for what you thought that you needed, but what you need is much greater than this little thing that they gave us.
Mhm.
So Rob and Vanessa, y'all are awesome. Y'all are my scholars. My
Still
my look,
pushing it.
my
She's still pushing
well-read
it.
God be the
guests.
glory.
I sincerely appreciate. I couldn't have picked better panel to have this discussion. Thank
Mhm.
you for hanging in there well past the little 90 minutes. Thank you everyone who is still on, for hanging with us well past the 90 minutes. Feel free again to like, share, and subscribe. Um, send this podcast to other people so they can listen. I do go back and check the comments, and I always respond. So even if you're catching this podcast on the replay, you're catching it after the fact, definitely feel free to engage me in the conversation. And then lastly, if y'all notice, our other host is not here. His anniversary is tomorrow. It is his 1 year wedding anniversary.
Aw, Paris.
Hey, they
Happy
made 1 year.
anniversary.
So proud of them. So proud and so happy. I don't know that he's returning, so I may be looking for a millennial host.
Oh, wow.
Mm.
um
So just gonna put it out there.
Yeah, because I don't want my son to feel pressure like he just
Right,
has to do this. I
right,
need it to
right,
be in your heart.
right, right.
And so yes, I'm looking for a possible millennial co-host. Not a I'm looking for a millennial co-host. So now if he still wants to join us, so then I have two. But I don't I'm trying to relieve the pressure off of him. And so yeah. So Rob and
Putting it
Vanessa, if
out
you know
there.
anybody who wanna sit and hang out with me every other Sunday and have a conversation, because the goal is to get um uh input from multiple generations.
Mm-hmm.
So the three of us, we in the same boat.
Oh,
I want
he
to hear, I want to hear from other people sitting in other boats, because you know what they see may look different than what we see.
right,
And
right.
so I think it's important that that we get different perspectives. So
Okay.
anyway, I love you all. I appreciate you. Thank you very much. Thank you everybody for joining. You be blessed. Have a wonderful evening. A safe week. Keep God first.
Yes.
And in the famous words of Russell Simmons, thank y'all for coming out. God bless you and good night.
All right. Have a
Good
good
night.
one.
All right. Thank you. Have a good one.